Tell me what you're doing with skateboarding and mental health.
So I recently started working for a couple professional skateboard companies offering therapy to the professional skaters.
That is so cool. And so we knew you here when you were a mentor at Untapped while going through your graduate program in mental health. And just watching you grow has just been incredible. So it's been very rewarding. And thank you for what you're doing. Tell me about the type of work you would do with skateboarders.
It's pretty much traditional therapy, but I think that what actually makes it work is that I'm also a skateboarder. And I incorporate skateboarding into my therapy with kids. And so I call it skate therapy. Instead of meeting in a therapy office, we go skate together. So it's kind of just been a lot of what I've been doing already through the skateboarding world. But with pro skaters, having been a skateboarder, I think just brings about more comfort. We have a shared language. We can talk about shared things. That's probably the best way in is I think they care about me also being a skater.
Turns out most people aren't opposed to mental health. Everyone wants to feel better, right?
Sure.
And have decreased anxiety, but they want to do it from someone who feels like they're like them.
Sure.
Right? So what does that look like?
It's really just like being myself, honestly, because I am also a skateboarder. I'm meeting with skateboarders, so I can really build rapport, build trust, build that foundation and bond just by connecting over a similar shared experience and background. And then just kind of getting to know more about their lives, being curious, letting them have the space to talk. And eventually we kind of just find our footing and our groove. And it looks different with every person that I work with. It's probably similar to mentors at Untapped too. With each kid that you work with, it's going to be a little bit different and you find your rhythm with everyone. But the main thing has actually been being more myself. When I was in grad school, I focused so much on this professional image because I'm a therapist and almost hiding the skateboarder in me. And I've just abandoned that. And I'm just showing up as the same person that you know me to be. And I think being genuine with who I am has allowed the therapeutic process to not seem so intimidating and off-putting. It's this is a guy that I could talk to.
Yeah, that's so cool. Another unique thing about you is you understand these executive function skills. So if a student has ADHD, high levels of anxiety, and you understand the therapeutic side, which turns out plays together. When a student's highly anxious, does that affect their executive function skills and their productivity?
Absolutely. So if you're highly anxious, you're feeling chaotic, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling like there's worry that you can't manage. That can be really disruptive for your whole life. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed and chaotic, to have structure, routines, organization, planning, cognitive flexibility, being able to adapt to different situations, that seems so out of reach when your nervous system is not regulated and you're feeling anxious. So higher anxiety will correlate with higher challenges with executive function skills in general.
As parents and coaches and mentors, how can we identify when a kid is very anxious?
Right, because they might not always just come out and say, I'm anxious, right? They might not have that vocabulary.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, I think, will be avoidance. If you notice that they're really avoiding this challenging thing and really going out of their way to avoid it. Physical symptoms like stomach aches and headaches, especially in the time when facing a challenge is arising. So, the somatic symptoms. Anything that really presents as ADHD symptoms can also be the same symptoms for anxiety. So inability to focus, disrupted sleep, kind of misplacing and forgetting things. Those can also be signs that they're not really in their body. There's a lot of anxiety and overwhelm and nervous system's really activated. And so being present, being grounded is really, just out of reach at the moment.
Yeah, you said ADHD and anxiety. Is there a correlation there as well?
I think so. Having an ADHD diagnosis already implies challenges in executive function skills. And when we're struggling to keep track of our things, to organize, plan, implement tasks, routines, that anxiety can really arise as a result of those challenges. So I think of it as the chicken and the egg. What came first almost? Am I so anxious that executive function skills are challenging, or do I not have executive function skills and now I'm anxious? So I really think that they feed each other. And I think working on one of them will help the other one.
I feel like that's often lost in our world. It's this kid is struggling. They may need executive function coaching or they may need therapy. Well, you're not doing wrong with either, right? And one of them is going to help the other one and vice versa. If we learn how to have better systems, our anxiety is going to go down and vice versa, right? And so, thank you for saying that. As a parent or a coach or a mentor, what can we do to help our kids with anxiety?
One of the first things is the way that we're even thinking about their anxiety. And so if we think, they have anxiety, that's bad, they need to have less anxiety, something's wrong, it's not really going to help by thinking of it as a negative thing. And so I think normalizing it. Everybody goes through moments where they feel like there's so much on their plate that it gets overwhelming and they kind of shut down a little bit and have a hard time focusing or moving forward. So normalizing, validating, hey, this is a lot to take on right now. This might get pretty challenging. How are you feeling? Just really not viewing it as bad. In addition to that, listening for the underlying message of anxiety. And what I mean by that is like every behavior that we do is trying to meet a need. And so even avoiding something, whatever it may be, we're trying to regulate ourselves in some kind of way. And so with anxiety, there's often a message in there of like, I'm not getting the support that I need right now. I'm afraid. Usually fear is the message. I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I'm afraid people are going to think poorly of me if I fail. So I'm not going to do this at all because I don't want to go through the failure. So there's usually something there. And so listening for what the anxiety is trying to communicate, almost treating the anxiety like, hey, this is showing up to communicate something to you. And so let's respect it, actually. Instead of thinking the anxiety is bad, let's show care towards the anxiety. What's the message that the anxiety has? And see if you can help with that. Oftentimes in the anxiety, there's actually a good message. Like, I care so much about what people think of me that I don't want to fail, so I don't want to take the risk. Or I care so much about doing good on this assignment that I'm really anxious about it now because I really want to do good. So speaking to that, instead of saying, oh, you seem really anxious about this, maybe you could say, hey, it seems like you really, really care about this a lot and you care about doing a good job. So you're thinking about it a lot right now. Can I support you a little bit? I see that you care about this. Can I just kind of go side by side with you and see if we can come up with a plan that might make this all a little bit easier? It's almost not even needing to treat anxiety as bad, but helping pull out the helpful message that's somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that normalizing is so important. And one of the things I learned from you is the anxiety and excitement, comparison. Oftentimes when we're anxious, we're just also very excited.
Yeah.
Like I know whenever I speak in public, I get so anxious no matter how many times I do it. But
Right.
There's a lot of excitement in there as well.
Right.
Whether it's pre-competition, pre-sport, pre-test, it's a dual-edged thing. And rephrasing it just helps so much.
Exactly, because that's such a good example that the anxiety is not all bad. Like it's showing up before you perform in a sport because it's boosting you, right? It's that like surge of adrenaline that you might need to perform better. So also just kind of reframing it of like, it's not always a problem when this shows up. Sometimes it's my body just motivating me. I have a friend who does a lot of theater. And at one point she told me like, if I don't get stage fright, it's going to be a bad performance.
Interesting.
Right? Like the stage fright is actually her like realizing, okay, here I go. I'm rallying. I'm getting behind this. I'm motivating. And so like kind of helping kids understand that if you're feeling those nerves, if you're feeling a little anxious before the big thing, that's not all bad. Sometimes that can kind of help motivate you. But it is a good time to pause and check in and just let you know that I see you. I see that this is coming up and I got your back. So how can I be helpful right now? But it's not bad.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I have like these elite skateboarders in my head. What I watch them do would cause me a tremendous amount of anxiety.
Sure.
When you have someone like that, if you have a kid like that who maybe is in a skateboarding or some type of really adrenaline producing activity, does that anxiety ever look different?
There's a whole range, I think. Like, I think that sometimes the nerves or the fear or the anxiety can be motivating and can be helpful. It's when it becomes so powerful that it really shuts you down and you can't regulate. You can't maintain your breath. Your body is getting to the point where it's like shaky or sweaty to an extent that is actually debilitating. So there's kind of a window there. And when it gets too far, we're like, oh, you're having trouble regulating, you're having trouble breathing. We're talking more about like panic attack at that point or something like that. And that's when the validating, normalizing, not asking them of anything, helping them breathe and kind of get back to a point where there might still be a little bit of nerves, but they can still receive feedback. They can still regulate a little bit. They can still pursue a challenge or a task or something like that. So there's a whole spectrum. And a word like anxiety, so many things could fit into that.
Yeah. And where I think you're so fascinating is you're doing a lot of your work with populations who I think most people would say would be resistant to mental health. If they are really resistant, and I think a lot of parents are in this boat, how do you approach that?
Yeah. So if I'm already working with them, it depends. Sometimes I work with adolescents who didn't choose to come to therapy. And then sometimes I'm working with an adult that might be resistant, but they still chose to be there. And so it's a little different. If they chose to be there, then that's telling me that they do want to be there, even if there's a little bit of resistance. But maybe there's a kid who really doesn't want to be there. And what I do, I say this all the time, but I validate that. I look for, with curiosity, what might be the resistance and trusting the resistance. Maybe the resistance has some wisdom in it. Maybe they don't want to open up because they have in the past and someone really shut them down when they opened up. And so maybe they're a little bit guarded for a reason. So I never approach the resistance as something wrong. In fact, I'm glad that they're being transparent with that resistance. And that's a good starting point for something like therapy. So it's always approached with curiosity, which is kind of like, oh yeah, I noticed there might be a little resistance right now. Is that coming up for you? Right? Like, yeah, that can really happen when we begin a process like this. There's so many unknowns. So I think that's pretty normal. Oh, do you want to tell me about any of that? Okay, you don't have to right now. Inviting the resistance to be a part of the conversation and treating the resistance like it has wisdom in it.
A lot of people I talk to, whether it's parents, coaches, teachers, they've done a lot of work on anxiety.
Sure.
They've read the books, they've listened to the podcasts, they've done the work. And they come into this interaction with this student and they want to help, and the student shuts them down. And then they get frustrated, and this frustration cycle continues. What advice would you give to that parent, teacher, coach, or whoever after they get shut down, even though they want to help?
So first thing I'd say that they're not alone, that this is very normal, especially with kids in school, right? If they don't choose to be there, there's going to be a lot of resistance. Something that I think could be helpful is for parents to model and normalize times that they feel that way too, because it's a human experience, right? To be anxious and overwhelmed and kind of shut down. As an adult, as a therapist, I still go through that too. And so not like hiding that, like normalizing in a way that, I recently had to do something at work that felt like a lot for me too. I kind of shut down and didn't really know how to do that. I know what this is like. This is pretty tough. Can we try to come up with something together? So they're not in trouble. In fact, you're sharing that you go through the exact same thing, and then focusing on developing, like you say, Brandon, like process over product with executive function skills. So if they're being resistant to starting tasks, help them develop those skills by doing something that they want to do. If they're already really resistant towards school, okay, that might be a longer goal. But maybe you can help them develop planning skills, organizational skills in something else. Are you going to go on a vacation with the family? And can you give them a task of really helping plan out things that are going to happen? Something like that. So they just get a little bit more familiarity with that process. And then over time, maybe that can go into school. Another thing, this is very much the therapist perspective, is helping them identify and name what they're going through. A lot of times we get anxious and we get shut down. And then the coach or the teacher is trying to motivate and trying to say, okay, let's do this. But there might be a little bit frozen. And so something that kind of can help kids or people move out of that process is actually understanding what they're feeling themselves. And that's where I think therapy is helpful. But also you can do things like, I have in my house, what's called a feelings wheel. You can just print it off on Google Images of different feelings and kind of like, hey, I was having a hard time understanding what you were feeling, and I just want to know where you're at so I can help you out. Do you feel like maybe you're feeling any of these, or what feeling might you be experiencing right now? Helping them get that vocabulary. I think that we have a lot more opportunity to work through a feeling when we know what we're feeling ourselves.
I think that's so important. The other thing, and this is where what you're doing is so cool, is that you're really taking the focus initially off this sitting one-to-one talking about feelings. You're skateboarding with the student. You're getting a lot out through that. I know that I do walk and talks. Especially with the young men I see, I would never try to have a hard conversation like this. And so I think that could be another method as well, is just talking through stuff, hard stuff while you're doing something.
Yeah, actually adding that movement. And another thing too is when the kid does show hard work or does pursue something, even though they might be a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious, whatever it may be, is acknowledging the effort that they're putting in. Maybe they're shut down and it's hard to get them to participate in homework or a sport or whatever, but then maybe they do it at some point. So when they do it, I think that's a really good time to just recognize, hey, I know that sometimes there's some resistance that you experience towards this, and that's okay. But I just wanted to recognize that you went ahead this time and you did it anyway. And I saw that. And so I just wanted you to know that I saw that you went ahead and did it. And just getting that little validation over time, you're rewarding, you're praising, you're encouraging effort, not success, effort. You tried, and I noticed that.
Does that help with anxiety, more focusing on this process versus this product type thing?
So much, because you're learning the skills. You're being encouraged to try, not being encouraged to be perfect. We don't just reward or praise or encourage when they succeed. It's just normalizing trying, even normalizing failure. You didn't really want to do this, and you went up and got it done or started it and did it anyway. So I just really wanted to recognize that. Really appreciate that. Do that more and more over time. And they realize, oh, I can take risks and pursue challenges because I was seen when I did that. I think it really helps.
Sometimes it feels like we're in conflicting worlds, right? Like we're executive function coaches who are focusing on accomplishing your goals, productivity, and getting things done. But oftentimes that ramps up anxiety.
Right.
We still need to get things done. But what would you say to a parent who is trying to help their student build executive function skills, but the student is just showing a lot of anxiety?
Sometimes I see parents like really believe in their kids so much, and they see their potential and they see their growth. And as a result, they have high expectations because they want to see them succeed. And so there's a lot of encouragement to meet these goals. And sometimes that anxiety can ramp up. So what I would say is take a step back a little bit. And the stronger the bond, the deep connection that you have with the kid, not the end goal, just the stronger the bond, it allows for so much to be built on top of that bond. You can ask for them to do more tasks if you have that stronger bond. So I think of like anxiety, stress, low self-worth as coming from a lot of pressures in the world. It's like a rain cloud, right? And it's storming down on the kid. Executive function skills can help mitigate that. They're almost the house, like they're the shelter. You build these executive function skills, these routines, these pillars, the shelter, and it protects you from a lot of that anxiety and stress of the world. The thing that holds the whole house up is the foundation. And the foundation is the bond. If your kid trusts you, if they know they can go to you when they made a mistake, when they quote unquote failed, when they're feeling anxious or insecure or unsure in themselves, and they know that they can go to you, the rest of the executive function skills, all of that is going to be easier achieved. So I would really focus on like taking a few steps back, getting away from the end goal actually, and focusing on that bond, laughing together, having earnest conversations with each other, letting them know that you appreciate them even in their times where they might have failed, especially in those times. Really building that bond so that you can then build the executive function skills on top of that, and then really protect from, the anxiety and concern and low self-worth and all that.
It's counterintuitive because it sounds like you're, just building this relationship and it's not going to help any other stuff, but you can hold them more accountable down the path.
Exactly. You can give feedback in a way that's not going to be threatening if they know that they have that secure relationship with you.
And it's been an honor to get to know you, and what you're doing is so innovative and cool. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.